See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
All right, I want to show you something here on Newsmax. Newsmax is going all out with the war propaganda, pro-war or pro-intervention / anti-Putin. Let's regime change. Let's hope Putin gets overthrown. Wink, wink, by some brave Russian. Wink, wink. Now they've been trying to overthrow Putin for years now, maybe over a decade, unsuccessfully. That's why Putin has had to kick out a bunch of US-based institutions and NGOs, and especially those associated with George $0R0 you know, the billionaire oligarch who loves to regime change countries for fun and profit, and who sort of years ago made his claim to infamy by manipulating currencies in order to wreck countries' currencies. Prosecutors ban Soron Foundation as threat to Russian national security. The Russian Prosecutor General's office has recognized George Soron's Open Society Institute and another affiliate organization as undesirable groups. Other groups on the list included the National Endowment for Democracy, the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, the MacArthur Foundation, and Freedom House. Don't you love these Orwellian names? These are all organizations that the government uses to infiltrate, undermine, destabilize, and overthrow foreign countries. The U.S. NGO had spent millions on attempts to question the legitimacy of Russian elections and tarnish the prestige of national military service. The Soron Foundation started working in Russia in the mid-1990s, but wrapped up its active operations in 2003. Now, I'm not sure. They must have seen other things or other arms or tentacles or its grantees having associated organizations, because he had a whole net, all kinds of tentacles of different organizations going even in recent years. So probably some of its sort of child organizations were still active up to 2015. They're all over Ukraine too, of course. NED deletes records of funding projects in Ukraine, March 7th. A CIA offshoot founded in the early 1980s to advance democracy promotion initiatives around the world has deleted all records of funding projects in Ukraine from the searchable awarded grant search database. That's interesting. The NED acknowledged that it had been a proud partner of Ukraine's civil society groups, media outlets, and human rights defenders since 1989. 1989. See, I told you. Didn't I tell you in one of my previous videos? If I didn't, I was remiss. But I should have told you that this was a CIA program going back before the dissolution of the Soviet Union to basically overthrow the former Soviet states. Once the Soviet Union dissolved, it was hatched during the Bush administration, at least, if not much earlier. Ukraine was the NED's fourth largest grant-making program around the world. This was a big deal for them. In order to paraphrase a saying I heard, this is a big effing deal for them. It's too bad they're losing. One of the speakers said a lot of her work with a NED-funded NGO focused on documenting Russian war crimes or alleged war crimes. Neglected was Ukrainian army war crimes. And there is an RT documentary, Donbass, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, that I haven't seen yet, but you might want to go check that out. I actually think I saw a part of it. Excavation of mass grave sites in Donbass, where neo-Nazi militias attached to the Ukrainian army massacred and then buried hundreds of civilians. The Ned, however, is committed to advancing the cartoonish narrative depicting Ukraine as a valiant David fighting the evil Russian bear. I think you should have said Goliath, just to be consistent with your metaphor. Ned supported not one but two color revolutions directed against Viktor Yanukovych. Remember, there was 2014. There was also 2004 under George W. Bush. They overthrew the People's Choice Yanukovych, who, by the way, was from eastern Ukraine. He was from Donetsk, which region has now much of it has declared itself independent and is now an independent republic. But they replaced Yanukovych with Viktor Yushchenko, the CIA groomed. Viktor Yushchenko, who favored admitting Ukraine to NATO, adopted it. I think that stands for iniquitous motherfuckers, a structural adjustment program that benefited U.S. investors while cutting social programs. You know, the usual austerity program. Bust paid out-of-town protesters into Kiev, created an online TV protest station and agitation paraphernalia, provided offshore training to the anti-Yanukovych student leadership. A template that the Ned had successfully employed in Serbia. Parallel approach was used during the February 2014 Maidan Square uprising, which resulted in Yanukovych's ouster again. The same guy got thrown out twice by the CIA. Twice. After the Yushchenko served, and Yushchenko was ousted by the people yet again and replaced again by Yanukovych, by the People's Choice. And they overthrew Yanukovych yet again. Now, the Ned hired a journalist, Sergei Lischenko, and used him to expose, quote-unquote, how Yanukovych, Viktor Yanukovych, the president who they threw out, had paid Republican Party strategist Paul Manafort $1.2 million as a political consultant. Have you heard the name Paul Manafort? Sound a little familiar? That was the campaign manager to Donald Trump, the original campaign manager to Trump. And this was how the Ned/the CIA used one of its minions, paid minions, Sergei Lischenko over there, to take what was later found to be forged documents and create a, quote, corruption scandal to ensnare Paul Manafort, and which was, of course, an early strike on the Trump campaign. Oh, what's this? Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Kiev officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by officials of a former Soviet bloc country. Now, of course, that's completely false. It's been completely debunked in the ensuing years after the story was written, January 11, 2017. Of course, the Russia collusion story never had a single thread or shred of evidence to begin with, but it had already been thoroughly debunked very shortly, certainly within a year from the date of this story. Anyway, the Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide in corruption. False. And suggested they were investigating the matter only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton's allies research damaging information on Trump and his advisors. A political investigation found in this story is very long, copiously sourced, even though it's also larded with the standard boilerplate and false mumblings and mutterings and murmurings about Trump and Russia and Putin, all of which were subsequently exposed as a complete hoax, fraud, and crime. However, still, this story contains lots of valuable and well-sourced information from Ukrainian folks about Ukraine's deep ties with the Democratic National Committee and Clinton and their strenuous efforts to try to knock Trump out of the campaign on behalf of the Clintons. It's very eye-opening. You should read this story. Politico, January 11th, 2017. Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Right around the same time, of course, that they were churning up Crossfire Hurricane, and they were creating and fabricating all kinds of cases, all kinds of quote-unquote evidence that Trump was on the payroll of Russia. His campaign, all his campaign was on the payroll of Russia. They were Russian agents. Trump's Russian 007. He's compromised. They got the fake dossier on him. They've got people listening in to just about everybody in his campaign, wiretapping his whole campaign. They have this fake Alpha Bank story that Alpha Bank's wearing the Trump Tower server. There's secret communications between Russia and Trump Tower. Then Russia hacked the DNC and stole embarrassing information and handed it to WikiLeaks because they want to take down WikiLeaks too, and tied that to Trump somehow. This all the same time, all around the same time that all this stuff is going on. They're also paying this guy in Ukraine to fabricate dirt on Paul Manafort. They later gave him a seat in the parliament as well. Well done, little minion. Well done. And let's also note that Petro Poroshenko, the guy who was installed in power during the Obama-Biden coup of 2014, he's currently awaiting trial on treason charges. That's a lesson to y'all who participate in these revolutions. That's what can happen to you. The Biden administration, intent on preserving the fiction that the Russian invasion counteroffensive was unprovoked, censorship, and the deletion of records is necessary. You're not patriotic if you don't go along with that. And here you have Kash Patel, who many of us thought was one of the good guys, just revealing himself and unmasking as one of these neocons, one of these deep state neocons, even though he sort of seemed to be fighting the deep state for Trump. But he's just another one of these ravenous, vicious neocons that wants to regime change other countries. These people make me fucking furious. Stay the fuck out of other people's business. And here's Newsmax with their completely amateurish attempts to scare you about Vladimir Putin with out of context, who, God knows, probably mistranslated remarks from Putin, plucked out of context. But I want you to focus especially in the comments, because these people know what's up. They're not fooled. Newsmax is in trouble. Their core audience, it seems, the people who are watching their videos, are not fooled and are contemptuous of this kind of manipulative programming.
Again, looking at the situation at the Ukraine-Polish
border,
families. Again, this does not stop, Allison. They say about 100 a minute are crossing over. Think about that. In Poland alone, we've got 2 million people that have crossed over. 2 million people is the population of 3.5 million. That's Los Angeles.
Where was their concern and tears for the 1+ million refugees from 2014 through late February 2022, mostly Russians from the Donbass, southeastern Ukraine, who were being ethnically cleansed by the Kiev regime and had to flee to Russia? Russia was the major recipient of refugees to that date. Where is the concern of these people for those people who were being murdered daily? Where's the concern for the children who were being blown up by shells, who had to spend their lives in basements? Where was the concern for people on buses being blown up, like we saw the other day in Donetsk, downtown Donetsk, which is the independent republic now that's split off from Ukraine, which has been under attack by the Ukrainian government for 8 years now, since Ukraine was overthrown by Washington. And Kiev has been waging war on the people of the Donbass for 8 fucking years, shelling civilians daily. The other day, I'm going to show you this next, they blew up buses and cars in residential buildings and shops, killing at least 25 people, civilians.
Oh my God. Спасибо вам большое. Я домой к детям хочу.
Как ты?
Курс 27 Б. Есть.
Сильно тяжело, может делать свою легковую погружение. Там ориентировочно. Все
Что это?
Точка У.
Да?
Над Донецком сбили.
This was perpetrated by Ukrainian forces on the center of Donetsk. This is a Tochka U, or NATO referred to as a Scarab missile. This held cluster ammunition. Over here we can see part of what appears to be the ammunition.
Where's your coverage of that? Where's your outpouring of concern about the 14,000 dead due to the Kiev puppet regime and its Ukraine Nazi death squads, now cleverly hiding behind this act or frontman Zelensky? What about all the little children of the Donbass who've been run out of their homes? What about all the children of the Donbass who've been blown up? What about the 25 civilians who I just told you about, who were blown up with weapons made in Texas? My next comment, Patel has unmasked as just another warmonger neocon. He provides no evidence that Putin is somehow attempting to recreate the Soviet Union. That's his theory, because there isn't any. Putin clearly gave the reasons for what he's doing before he did it. And in fact, for months and years prior, NATO expansion to the borders of Russia, a knife being held to the Russian people's throat. 2, the ethnic cleansing of the Russians in eastern Ukraine, which you're not talking about. Over 1 million refugees as of late February taken in by Russia, and 14,000 dead. You people are complete hypocrites.